come to our attention that out there who are claiming that they are the legal owners of Hoehn Research Library. And so today we want to welcome you to join us as we go through the documentation to prove that Mark and Melanie Robansky of Testimony Press Publications are the legal owners of not only Hoehn Research Library, but also Narrow Path Ministries.
And the reason we're even spending this time to bring you this information is because in the last several years that this has continued to come into the ministry, it has been brought to our attention that people are being demanded to give monies to these entities that are saying, we are the rightful owners of Hoehn Research Library, you need to support us. And so we thought that for the people of God's sake, we needed to bring this to the table and say, this is where Hoehn Research Library is, and let people know that these imposters are stealing your money for nothing.
Number one, we do not ever ask for donations or for money. We are truly self-supporting. We accept donations, but we do not ask. And above and beyond that, why we are sharing this information with you today is because there are several miracles that we will be sharing that really been an encouragement to us, and we hope that they will be an encouragement to you. So join us as we go into the life of the individuals that are behind Hoehn Research Library.
In 2008, a lady came to my house and she gave me 2 booklets or pamphlets, and she said, "Have you read these?" I said, "No, I've never seen them." One was on the 10 Virgin Parable and the other on the Tunnel of Love in the Hour of Temptation. And I read the Tunnel of Love in the Hour of Temptation, not realizing these are written in telegraph style. And you have to look up all of the quotations that are given at the bottom of each paragraph or sentence.
And I looked at it and tried to read it, and
I said,
it
Mark,
didn't
look
make
at this. You gotta
any
read this.
sense to me. It was like there was this wall of black that I just could not see through to understand it. That was initially back then.
In reading this first pamphlet on the Tunnel of Love, the Hour of Temptation, I thought, the spiritualism isn't that strong. This guy is really stretching things, and it agitated me. And so I spoke to the lady about it, and she said, well, there's supposed to be study guides. So I kind of scratched my head on that, and then I went back through and I started looking up all of the Bible and Spirit of Prophecy references given. And it took me about 28 days to do that. And by the time I was done...
For the one book.
For the one booklet. By the time I was done, because I was reading around everything that had been put there to make sure it wasn't these Spirit of Prophecy quotes and Bible verses weren't taken out of context. Then I headed into the 10 Virgin Parable. And by the time I got halfway through it, I knew I had to meet Anna DeMichael Hoehn. And so I got directions to her house and went to meet her.
That began the whole journey.
Yes.
So we made our way to Anna's house, and we knock on the door, and initially there's no answer. And then this little lady comes to the door, and she says, "Who are you?" And we talk for a moment, and she said, and didn't invite us in, but she says, "Okay, well, we'll go out to the ministry room. I'll meet you out there." So we walk out there, and we're waiting, and pretty quick, here she comes. And she, with her walker, yes,
and the keys to let us
and to the keys to unlock the door to her ministry room. And we go in, and there are shelves all over, and boxes, and books, and books, and books. We had no clue of the sheer volume of material that was there. So I sat on a stool, Melanie had a chair there, and Anna sat down in a chair, and we began visiting with her. And to make the long story of that visit short, we left there with an armload about like what I have here of publications. And at that point, Melanie was pretty excited about it. And because she kind of figured things out, and I was still a little dubious of the whole thing, but that was okay. And something else I want to mention, and that was as we met Anna, we immediately noticed her face was quite significantly disfigured on the one side. And we wondered what had happened, but for sake of not wanting to embarrass her, we did not ask any questions at that point in time.
So why don't we move into the next room and the table where you have all the documentation set up
Okay.
that shows that we did know Anna and
Who Anna was,
Who Anna was.
and how that all transpired.
okay.
Okay, we're going to take a little step back in time with this one because we need to be able to establish some information about Anna. Anna DeMichael was one of the children of Mary Biro. I have here Mary Biro's certificate of naturalization from September 21, 1889, and gives some of her information there on that. I have here her birth certificate, and Anna Biro, her middle name is Margaret, was born March 6 of 1921 to Bert Biro. Mary was her mother. And so this is Anna's birth certificate. I also have a certified copy of her birth certificate from the health department. And this one is also actually a signed certified. So I have several of these birth certificates. Now I mentioned when we were in the last little segment, I mentioned that Anna's face was disfigured. And here's the reason why. I have a letter here from Stephen T. Nagel, Niggel, and it is dated 8/1946, and it says, Miss Anna Biro, and gives the address, shows negative bone pathology of the left fibula. This patient, in my opinion, had a slight attack of polio in her youth. And so this was actually part of how we came to the understanding that why her face was disfigured, is we have this document explaining that. So I have here, when Anna was young, I have a picture of her. And actually I have another picture here of her when she graduated from the missionary school, Washington Missionary College. And something that I guess I should explain here at this point is, I'm talking about Anna. Well, Anna is the one that we met. So how does Hoehn Research Library get into this? You will see as we continue on with the connections. So I have documents here establishing that Anna received a missionary license in Ohio in August 1 of 1952. And I also have from the Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, Mount Vernon, Ohio, January 10, 1951. I actually have her pay record. She received a total of $1,227 for the year from the conference. So Anna was married to Patsy DeMichael, and I have here a picture of her wedding with Patsy. and they lived in Ohio. And over time, Anna met through the audio recordings of Herman Hoehn, met Hoehn with his ministry, and she began, because Hoehn was in Canada, Anna began doing some of the duplicating of Hoehn's audios. And as she did that, the interesting part about this is Patsy was a cradle Catholic, and to the best we could find, he never changed from that stance. But he did support his wife with the work that she was doing with helping with Hoehn Research Library. Well, jumping forward in time a little bit, I have here the newspaper clipping. Oh, I should have showed this first. A couple of little pictures here of Anna and Patsy leaving the church, the Methodist church, as they were married. Here's Anna with her bridesmaids from the wedding. And I actually have here, this certifies that Patsy D. Michael, Youngtown, Ohio, and Anna Bureau of Youngtown, Ohio, were united in holy matrimony. So I actually have the wedding certificate that they received from the church at the time of their marriage. Now, jumping forward in time to October 12, 1986, Patsy D. Michael, at age 77, died. And I have from the Vindicator here. And just a little bit more information, just giving you proof that we really do have this documentation. I actually have Patsy D. Michael's social security number, and I have some pictures here, numerous different pictures of them together. And I also have an interesting little deal here. I have a little tiny card, and this card, it has Patsy D. Michael, and it says Youngstown Vindicator on it. Patsy D. Michael actually worked in the mailroom of the Youngstown Vindicator. And this was dated in 1973. So just a little bit of information about Patsy. So after Patsy's death, Anna continued working with Hoehn, and even in a little bit greater way. Melanie, why don't you come and join me here and share with everybody how Anna ended up being, because obviously we lived in Washington State when we met Anna. So I'd like you to share with how she ended up out in Washington State from Ohio.
Okay. Well, for years, for almost 20 years, her and her husband were the tape duplicators for the Hoehn Research Library. Patsy would help her with this. He lent money to this. And when he died, all of their family was Catholic. She had come into the Adventist Church 5 years before the book Questions on Doctrines came out. And he had almost joined her in that move to Adventism. And then she said, when Questions on Doctrines came out, she said, I can't stay in this church. I've read the book. They've become Catholic. And so Patsy said, wait a minute. I can't do your religious hip-hop. I can't keep up. So he just backed off, but he was fully on board. They would host meetings in Ohio for Hoehn as a platform to reach the people in that area. But when Patsy died, the rest of the family, all being Catholic, were not accepting of what she believed. And so she made her Abrahamic pilgrimage. Because of Anna's polio, her and Patsy never had any children. They never had any children. And so Hoehn, being a widower, said, why don't you come up here? And mail in Canada they had had strikes. The mail had become 10 times more expensive. Especially if you were mailing to America from Canada. And so Hoehn said, hey, I got an idea. I live right across the border.
In British Columbia.
in British Columbia, we'll buy you a house on the American side, and we can do ministry from the two houses. They were literally 18 miles apart. So she bought this little house on the road, and a little bit of acreage, and with a building that they put into the ministry, and they built shelves in there, they put the publications in there, and she would mail out to the mailing list in America all of the stuff there. She had a little log cabin he'd
Yes.
come and stay in,
Stayed in the log
and
cabin.
sometimes he'd come down and type. He'd just one finger peck, she said. So it took him a while to make these publications and letters and etc. But he would come down and he would spend time in his little one-room log cabin behind her house, and people started talking and saying, "Oh, look at these elderly, they're into a illicit relationship." And so to squelch all of the rumors. They went and got a marriage license, and then they were legal to work together.
So right here, I
Here's the marriage
have
license.
their a photocopy. We never found the original. It may have been
Right.
something that he had, but this is a stamped,
Certified.
a certified here original
State of Washington.
of
And what was the date they got married?
they got
August?
married the 3rd of August in 1991.
91. So they did this to continue on the ministry. What this did was put her in his will to receive Hoehn Research Library. Once you call the church for what it's doing, call it to task on the apostasy that is allowed to creep in, you're no more popular than skunks under the
Yes.
under the hen house. So this working together they did from 1991 until Hoehn died in 2000. January 15 of 2000, Hoehn died. He went into a nursing home to heal from a fall or something, and she had gone to visit him a couple of days before his death, and he said, "Don't come tomorrow." He says, I'm in a bad way." He says, "I'm gonna have to have the nurse get me one of their laxatives or something." And she says, "Well, I can bring you some herbs." And he said, "No, don't bother." He says, "I want you to get this, and this done." And she said, "Okay." And she took the list home and she worked on it, and she wanted to get that list of things done, the mailing sent out and all of this stuff done before she went back up to see him. And it was about 2 weeks, I believe. And she went up there, and he had died just 2 days after she saw him on the 13th. And so the family had already cleaned out his house pretty much. So what she inherited was some of the few things that were still left there, and all of the stuff that he had in the little log cabin behind her house,
Yes.
which thank God was a lot of his study books.
And the
And
majority
we'll
of
show
the
you those. And
publications
the
were
majority.
all there because
Exactly.
they were actually being printed on
In
the
the
US
US
side
side. Yes.
at that point in time.
So she was able to keep that and the ministry
So
going.
she continued with
Yes.
by his
With his
verbal
blessing.
blessing. So as our time with Anna went on, we made numerous trips over to visit with her.
So they
One day when we were there together, I was sitting there talking with Anna, and you were cleaning, and I think
Yes.
you were in the kitchen
I
at
was in
that
the
point,
kitchen.
and I was sitting in the living room on a little footstool next to her chair, and Anna and I were talking, and out of the clear blue, she says to me, "I need to make a will." And I said, "Oh, well, we'll have to find a lawyer or something." And she goes, "No, I think you can do it." I was like, "I don't know anything about making wills." Well, long story short, I didn't do anything to start with. And when we went back, it was like
3 months later.
3 months later, we were back over, which was, it was the next time I was there. You had gone, I think, once or
Yeah.
twice in between, but the next time I came over, she says to me, "So, do you have that will ready?" And I said, "You're serious, aren't you?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll work on it. I'll see what I can do. I'll look online and see what I can find." So I did some searching, and I found some legal documents and paid a little fee to get access and whatnot to this legal thing and whatnot. And so I put it together. So then I went over once I'd found that, we went over and you were cleaning again, and I talked to her and I said, okay, Anna, what we need to know of your things, what you want to go where, and who you want it to go to, how you want your estate handled. And she said...
May I interject here?
Yes.
She had already told me the time before when I went over. She said, Melanie, I was sitting in that chair the other day, and she said, I told the Lord, I'm almost 90, and that's old. And I'm tired, and I can't keep going with this. And I asked the Lord, please, who do I give Narrow Path Ministries Hoehn Research Library to? And she said, the Lord spoke to my heart and said, give it to Mark and Melanie Robansky. And she said, so that's what I have to do. And that kind of shocked me, and I said, Anna, we already have a ministry. And she says, well, God told me to give this to you, and so that's what needs to happen. And I said, well, what would that entail? Because I'm thinking, my house is full. And she said, the Hoehn books and things. And I said, oh, okay.
So when I'm sitting down there with her, and I start asking her, she says, so I'm going to give all of these things to you. And I was like, no, Anna, we need to, you need somebody, an executor of the will, somebody who's going to make sure that everything happens. She says, that's you. And I said, no, Anna, I'm just helping you put it together. She goes, listen, son. She says that my wish is that you will be my executor and make sure that what I want done is done, and I am giving everything to you. And I sat there kind of looking at her. Melanie hadn't even mentioned this other conversation until after we left, because about that point you came into the room and you were saying something about, you were serious, weren't you? And she was saying yes.
Yeah.
And anyway, so we put a will together for her, and we actually took her to a little local doctor clinic, and they did an examination. That was, we had to tell about a fun part.
She was afraid that somebody would contest it. So Mark called the health place up there, made the appointment, and we take her in. And the lady there says, so you're of sound mind? Well, we've got to quiz you. Mm-hmm. The lady said, now I'm going to ask you, I'm going to tell you the name of 3 things, and then we're going to count backwards by 7s, and then afterward we're going to come back, and I want you to tell me those 3 things. And it was apple, pencil, and book. And then she went through and she said, okay, now I want you to count backward from 100 by 7s. And Anna just started ripping off the numbers, and she gets down into the 30s, and she said, is it? And the lady said, honey, we'll quit there. You lost me 5 ago, or 6 numbers ago. And we all started laughing because we're all trying to count on our fingers, and she's just going on these numbers. And then the PA says to her, so what were those 3 things that I mentioned to you? and
she says, oh my, she says, book
and
paper,
and out from under the chair, because Matt had been crawling around, he says, apple pencil. And Anna says, oh yes, thank you, apple pencil. And the lady started laughing, and she says, you're not supposed to help. And Anna says, that's okay. She says, I couldn't have remembered them anyway.
But the PA did the test again on her,
yes,
a few minutes later,
and
after she asked some other things and whatnot.
And she got all 3 of them. Different items.
The PA at the end, she says, I hope I'm doing half that good when I'm 90 years old.
Yes, she was quite impressed with Anna's sharpness.
So I have here, well, to start with, we did a healthcare directive living will that I have here. And we did a general power of attorney as part of that. And we also did the last will and testament. And this was signed on March the 16th, 2011 by Anna D. Michael. And this is a notarized copy original copy of the will. And I want to read just one part of this will. And she says here, pending the distribution of my estate, my executors, which were named above, that would be myself and Melanie, my executors shall have authority to carry on any business, venture, or partnership in which I may have any interest at the time of my death. That was Narrow Path Ministry and Hoehn Research Library that she was specifically speaking of. So I have here in my hands a original of the death certificate. Date of death, March 28, 2011.
And the reason I went to pick this one up is, notice, this was completed on March 16 of 2011. And she told me just a couple days later, after this was done, she says, now I can rest in peace, knowing that God has picked the next successors of Hoehn Research Library.
So,
And the next time we came back, she was dead.
Yes.
well,
I would
Melanie
call her.
you had been over 2 days prior to her death,
Yes.
and
We had prayer every night together on the phone.
on the phone, and you had tried to call her that
the night before.
night before, and you were scheduled to go over the next
And it was a
day.
busy signal. And I told Mark, something's wrong. I need to go over. And he said, it's 9 o'clock. It's an hour and 40 minutes over there. You're going to wake her up. Well, I didn't go.
The next
The
morning,
next morning,
I went to work, but you called, and after 2 or 3 calls, and it's still a busy signal.
I got in the car and went over.
Yeah.
And I met.
How far was it?
It was
An
an
hour
hour
and
and
40
40
minutes.
minutes. We lived in Tenasket. She lived in Curlew.
Curlew.
And so when I got there, her helpers were standing in the yard. She had gone to answer the phone, and her chair at her desk was on wheels. And as she went to sit down in it, it spun across the room and left her behind on the floor. And so she had crawled into her bedroom, and eventually, and she couldn't
She
get
had a
up.
hard time getting
She had-
up
she had a
because
hard
of
time getting
the
up.
missing foot and
Yes.
her age.
And her age. And so she had pulled the pillow and the blanket off of her bed and covered herself and went to sleep on the floor. So that's how we found her that morning. So how does one begin the process of legal business of trying to get this inheritance passed into our name? We had to hire a lawyer. And we immediately started looking in Tenasket, which was a lot closer to us than the town that Anna was from. And quickly we found one. Our town was small enough to just have a couple. And we went in and asked this fellow, is it possible that you do these kinds of things in your law firm here? Because there are different lawyers who do different things. And he said, oh yes, I handle that kind of case. And so we put the $2,000 down on the table and signed the papers. His wife gave us a receipt, and we thought we were off and rolling. But he stood up then and said, I work for the state of Washington, and I don't care what this will says. You cannot be the executors and the inheritors of everything. And so you're going to have to prove that you are the only one in the rundown. Did she have any relatives? And I said, she's got nieces in Ohio. And he said, well, give me the keys to her place. You're not allowed over there. If you're caught over there, the state of Washington will da-da-da. And he goes into this spiel of how I would be in trouble if I went back over to the place. And so I gave him the keys, and that was the end of March and beginning of April. And it wasn't until the middle of May, after I had paid up at the funeral home where she was on ice, I had paid him to keep her on ice, that I finally went back in the middle of May, and I said to the lawyer, how am I supposed to find anybody when I can't even get into her house? And I labored with him for quite a while, and then he finally said, okay, I'll give you a key, but don't you dare take anything out of that place. It belongs to the state of Washington. And so I went over. He said, well, how do you plan to find who she's related to? And I said, I'll have to look through her personal effects. I don't know the names of any of her family. So Matthias and I went over. We spent 3 days there. And I went through all these papers that she had kept everything. She'd kept boxes and boxes of all this from the ministry, all this cards and letters and everything that had been sent to her. And finally, about 11 o'clock the third night, I went through a box, and I could tell it was family, but there were a lot of cards, but there were no envelopes with most of them. And finally I came across an envelope that said, Dear Aunt Anna, happy 87th birthday. I think it was a couple years old. And I said, hallelujah. It had an address and a name. And so I got on the computer and I started looking for the name of the husband and wife that were the niece and nephew-in-law of Anna. And I called the number after finding it in search and got a hold of a man who had dementia. And he kept saying, Dorothea's not here. Dorothea's not here. You have to see Dorothea. And I couldn't get anywhere with him. And I realized this elderly man he was home alone, and he was incapable of telling me what happened to Dorothea. And I said to him, does anybody else stay with you? And he said, yes, sometimes. And I said, when can I call when they're there? You call later. And so I did call back later, and it was his daughter that answered the phone. And I told her my situation, and she said, oh, my mom has been in a coma for several months in a nursing home. And I said, well, I need these papers signed. Is there any way and she said, well, her executor is my daughter. She says, my mother and I have had a falling out several years ago, and she's made my daughter the executor of her will. And I said, oh, where do I get a hold of this person? And she said, well, she's actually in a sorority at such and such university. But she says, I'm afraid when you get a hold of my daughter, she's going to get a lawyer, because she's become a party animal, she's into drugs, and she's always looking for ways to make money. And I thought, oh, Lord, we don't need this. Please help me. And I said, well, please let me try. So she gave me her daughter's number. I called her, and sure enough, my great aunt Anna died and left. How much is she worth? And I said, honey, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I just know that she wanted us to inherit it because she had a ministry with her second husband here. And I tried to tell her a little bit about it, and she immediately got hostile and told me that she wanted to get a lawyer, and my lawyer would have to talk to her lawyer. And she did. She got a lawyer, so we're still stalemated. And I went out to my bench morning after morning that our older son had made for me that overlooked the Cascades. And I would pray there every morning and just plead with God about this whole situation and say, Lord, this is your ministry. You have to hold it. If these Catholic relatives get a hold of it and come in there, Hoehn Research Library is dead. So if this is your ministry, I need you to get up and fight for me. I got another phone call from the funeral home in Oroville where she was on ice, and he said, a second payment's coming up, and I really need this freezer. Is there any way you could expedite this? And I said, no, this is what's happening. Now we've got a lawyer involved with. And I was by this time pretty desperate and cried a bit to him. And he said, "Oh man, I'm sorry. Well, just hold on the money." He said, we'll see what we can do here. He says, maybe I'll call your lawyer and whatnot. And then the lawyer called me and said, "You've got this guy involved with the funeral home." And he says, we are in litigation now with this lawyer from Ohio. And so he said, "You just need to pay your bills." And I went back out to my bench. I said, "Lord, please help me." And a couple days went by, and then the phone rings one morning, and it was the funeral director. And he said, "Melanie," he said, "the Lord impressed me this morning to just call you and have you just call the nursing home where Dorothea is in a coma and talk to the social worker director and ask her to sign, because she can sign for Dorothea if Dorothea's in a coma." And I said, "Oh, okay, thank you." And I hung up the phone, and I'm thinking, this guy who weighs 400 pounds and looks like a drinker and can't get the cigar out of his mouth even after he's snubbed it out so it won't be in your face when you're trying to pay your bills. God told him this, and the Lord spoke to my heart and said, just obey, just obey. No matter what he looks like, just obey. And so I called the nursing home again, and I had called several times before to see if she was awake, and the director of nurses had said no. But I didn't know about the social worker step. So I asked that morning, I said, "Is there a social worker there that I could speak with, the director?" And they said, "Yes, we'll patch you through to her." And so they did. And I got on the phone, I told her my story, told her my whole problem with the granddaughter getting a lawyer, etc. And she said, "Well, lady, you're in luck this morning. Dorothea just woke up 3 or 4 hours ago, and she says, I'll go in and pick up the phone in her room and you can talk to her, and I believe she'll be able to sign for you." And I said, "Oh no, I don't want to distress her if she just came out of this coma." And she says, "Honey, I don't think you're going to shake a 81-year-old very much by telling her 90-year-old aunt died. She hasn't been in contact with her for years," you said. And so, seeing each other, so obviously it's not going to shake her bones too bad. And I said, "Okay." So she took the phone off the receiver in Dorothea's room, and she handed it to Dorothea, and I went through and told Dorothea the sad news and what Anna's wishes were. And she said, "Why do you call her Anna DeMichael Hoehn?" And I said, "Because she married Herman Hoehn, and they worked in the ministry together, and that's why she's giving it to me. She wants me to have." And she said, "She never told us she married him. I didn't know that. But you know what? It makes sense to me that she would do that for her Lord. She was a Christian woman." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, she was." And she says, "Honey, I'm really mad about what Sarah's doing to you, and I'm going to fix that problem. I'll get her lawyer off your back." And she says, "Just have your lawyer send me the papers, and I will sign them this morning. Do it right away." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, and thank you, and God bless you." And so I called the lawyer. I hung up with her, and I called the lawyer who had just gotten into his office. And I said, "I need you to fax the papers to a Dorothea in such and such a nursing home at this fax number." And he's like, "How did you do that?" I said, "I didn't. I told you I have a great big wonderful God, and he wants me to have this ministry." And he said, "Oh," and he hung up the phone. And 2 hours later, his wife called me and said, "We have papers signed from a Dorothea such and such. How did this happen?" So I told her the miracle, that Dorothea had just wakened up and that she was able to sign after being in a coma for a couple months. And she said, "Oh, wow, okay. By the way, we also got a call from the lawyer back there, and he says he's off the case." And I said,
yes, ma'am, he would be because we have signed papers from Dorothea, correct? And she said, oh, yeah, okay, thank you. And she hangs up. And so I went rejoicing in the Lord that day that God had directly answered my prayer. And by the end of the day, the daughter of Dorothea was calling me and she says, I just have one request. She said, is there have you seen any pictures in the house? And I said, I've seen one or two. And she said, I would really like the family pictures. My mom says that Auntie had a lot of pictures of my mom and my all the family that was involved with her back here when I was little. There should be pictures of me in there when I was just 2 and 3 years old. And I said, I'll send you whatever I find. And so I did. We went to clean out the house, and I found 2 large boxes of photos. And I packaged them all up, and I sent them to Teresa, and with a note of condolences and, well, wishing her for her mother waking up and etc. It was about 2 months later, she called me. And she said, I want to thank you for these pictures. I've finally gotten to open the boxes and go through them after settling everything here. And I said, oh, praise the Lord. And she says, there are a lot of pictures of my childhood, and I just want to thank you. And I said, how's your mom doing? And she said, you don't know? And I said, no. And she said, my mom woke up for 5.5 hours in time to sign your papers. She went back into a coma and died a couple weeks later. And I said, oh, Teresa, I'm so sorry. And she says, no, she needed to die. Taking care of Dad in his condition was just really hard for her. But it has been hard picking up the pieces and everything. And this is why I'm finally, just now, getting to these photos. So God let me know via the photo issue that he specifically woke Dorothea up so that I could have those papers signed, get the other lawyer out of the picture, and take the ministry over by the will of God.
Along with the ministry, Hoehn Research Library, we received a lot of audios in different formats. We received from there a lot of cassette tapes, what's considered obsolete technology today, but we got cassettes, and we also got some technology that was a little older than that I want to talk about for just a moment. And that's this guy sitting here next to me. This is a reel-to-reel player, tape player recorder. And this was the common use even before my time. These were obsolete when I was young, but I had the opportunity to play with one when I was young, so I learned quite well how they work and how to run them. I'm very grateful for that now because as we got tapes, we got over 200 cassette tapes. Here's a sample of some of them up here. And we also got stacks of reel-to-reel tapes. Now these reel-to-reels, they come as a tape like this on a reel, and literally the tape is just here and you have to put them into it. Along with all of this technology here, from really old, we have this unit here that I've had for many years. This is a multi-track recorder, very, very high quality cassette tape player. And so we can put a cassette into this machine, plug it into the computer, use the software like what I have here on the screen on the computer, and we can then record the cassette or the reel-to-reel onto the computer, then making it into digital format, being able to put it on the website, as well as some of them we've been putting onto CD, which is actually now considered obsolete technology as well. So I just want you to be able to hear. I have one of the Hoehn tapes, and I want you to see that this actually works. So we're gonna and I'm not actually recording it there at the moment, but
Are you a Seventh Baptist? Can you take part in this? The proclamation of the soon coming of Christ, the necessity of obedience to the commandments of God, and the testimony of Jesus. Oh, you won't deny this, will you? This is...
and with these old machines, you notice his voice kind of sounds slow and draggy. That's because his machine that he recorded this particular tape on, by the way, this tape was done in 1959. By the way, it's kind of interesting. There's 1,800 feet of tape on this reel. But Hoehn's machine was kind of old and got a little bit draggy, so it sounds there as we played this.
6, page 290. Let's see if you go along with all of this.
It just sounds a little draggy.
Proclamation of the soon coming of Christ. Oh yes, we're doing that.
So what we're able to do with the electronics is speed that back up
Proclamation of the soon coming of Christ. Oh yes, we're doing that.
and get it so that then he sounds like his voice would sound. We are now working on getting, actually this stack up here has been put onto the computer. We're going through kind of cleaning them up a little bit. We're not deleting or editing out things, just where he pauses, we're cleaning that up and taking out some of the extra spaces and putting it together and getting them online so that each one of you have the capability of listening to hear. And I'll tell you, as I record these off and I listen to these tapes, the message that is coming through is as applicable today as it was back in 1959, 1960, and the tapes go on into the 1990s. They are very, very applicable to our time.
So here on the table before me, I have a sample of what we have a lot of. The pamphlets that were Hoehn's. Anna had asked us to redo them, not in telegraph style, but in a different form, and she said, please put tears in your pen because they're hard-hitting and that scares a lot of people away. So we had started doing that the first couple of years of having the ministry, and then in 2015 I was poisoned, and after 2 weeks in bed, so weak I couldn't climb the stairs from my heart being affected by the poisoning, I told Mark, we don't have enough time. We've had this ministry 3 years and republished 3 of these books, and there's gobs of them. Why don't we just make a Hoehn research library site? And so we did. We spent 2 weeks after I was able to get out of bed putting these onto a website, Hoehn-research-library.org, and that's not all that we had, but it was all we had time for between construction jobs. I've had people, about a year ago, I had someone call and say something about the Hoehn books, and I said, oh yes, we're the inheritors of those. And the person disbelieved me and asked me if I was lying. So today, part of this is to strive to show you, if somebody's giving you some of these pamphlets that we have online and saying they own Hoehn Research Library, ask them if they also have the reports. Lots and lots of reports. These have not been put on the website yet. We have lots of reports. Report number 191, August 3, 1966, called Criticize and Condemn. Report 259, Mission 72, report number 2, July 8, 1972. Then we have here a whole bunch of flyers that are one-page tracts, a large page, but these, like this one, flyer number 457, The Greatest Blasphemy. 40 Facts, KDNA, flyer number 424, and so on. We have a lot of these in the files that we hope someday to make available to the public. We also have gobs and gobs of personal letters, which I almost threw away when we moved, and then I opened it up and started glancing through, and his answers to people are so powerfully spot on with his knowledge of the Bible and the original spirit of prophecy that, for instance, this one on the top right here is the second page of a letter, and it says, the church militant, point 1. Sister White wrote that the SDA church of her time was the church militant. Is that right? This person asked. So that is settled, right? It was the church militant then, he says, in 1893, CTM 61. Just what was the Seventh-day Adventist Church of 1893 militant about? They were militant. Militant means actively fighting. They were at war. With what? Who were they warring against? They were in a battle to the death with the Pope, with his Sunday, with Easter, and his Christmas, and his priestly rituals, and the idea that church was going through all of them. They stood opposed to war, to education of drugs and styles, and you add the rest of the 200 things the Seventh-day Adventists have given up fighting against, including holy picture images and the facts that papists put crosses on their churches, their altars, and their garments. And then he goes on with more of this. These I would like to someday make available to the public, and that's just a portion of them. I have a large amount of them. We also inherited his books, which have been a help to me as, not so much this one, but a lot of his books are very well marked, and he's got references to different things all over the backs of them. Interesting to study and see what he's put in here. Number 5 is well marked with the different things that she stated about, like the superficial conservative class, etc. We also have books that he left there at Anna's, Questions on Doctrines, which was well written in. It has everywhere in it where they have stepped off the platform, and he's made meticulous notes in the back. Incredible job of marking. Through Crisis to Victory was another admission book by the church to show the changes and the skullduggery of what was going on, and they went into victory all right. Victory and Apostasy. And the things that I've really appreciated were his Review and Heralds that he has put some notes in, as well as carefully laid out numbers of pages, like Wolves, page 217, 225, 245, 388, 363, and these are literally study guides that I have really appreciated through the years since I inherited these. It has helped me in our studies as well. So there you have it, just a little bit of what we have from the Hoehn Research Library that is yet unavailable. So the next time somebody says to you, oh, I'm the inheritor of Hoehn Research Library, say, do you have his personal letters from and to people? Do you have his flyers? Do you have his reports? I would like to see them, please. We here at Testimony Press have all of this in our hands. We are not liars. We really seriously did inherit Hoehn Research Library and Narrow Path Ministries.
Now, if you'll come with us now, we'll take a tour to show you how we prepare these papers. This is the typewriter room. We prepare the papers on this one typewriter, and the other operator makes the masters on that sharp typewriter. So we have two operators at the same time. Now we'll go into the press room and have a quick look there. This A.B. Dick press. It's obsolete now, but there we have the vibrator that shuffles the papers.
I wanted to point out a piece of equipment that he had there, he mentioned, and that is the jogger. This is a little Martin Yale jogger, and this is that jogger that was there. And I have here a stack of books. This happens to be a Spirit Prophecy Volume 4. You put them in there, and how they're all not even and whatnot to cut up. So just put it in there. And there we go. They're all nice and even. So that was Hoehn and Anna's jogger. It's still jogging in our ministry of printing, and I think it's got a lot of years of life left in it.
And over here we have the paper folder, and further along there we have the cutter. And we want you to see the shells that we made. You see the shells up there? Tim, our helper, wrapped them up so that not just plain boards. I guess that's about what we wanted to show you. Andy Michael's in the middle of it.
Okay, in summary of this video, bringing it all back together, first of all, I want to remind you of the fact that we have the marriage certificate of Hoehn and Anna. We have that. We also have the last will and testament that clearly specified from Anna that Mark and Melanie were to receive not only the ministry, but all of her personal effects. And I have here, something I didn't share with you earlier, is a document from the Superior Court of Washington for Ferry County. And their findings is listed here. This is in regards to Anna D. Michael, deceased, and their orders. And on the orders, it specifically states, Petitioner Mark W. Robansky is appointed as the descendant's personal representative and executor to serve without bond and with non-intervention powers. The decedent's will is the last will and decedent and is admitted to probate. So with this, and I guess the final one I should read here is the clerk of the court shall promptly issue letters of testamentary to Mark W. Robansky upon the filing of his sworn oath of personal representative. So this is what made this will a legal document. And so we've been doing our best to get this material made available, and we will be continuing to make it available as time allows for us to do this. And we want these materials to be made available to everyone so that they can read them, so that they can learn from them, and so that it can change their lives. I believe Hoehn was years ahead of his time, and he strived to awaken a people, and sometimes he can be kind of pointed and rather hard. And something that's very interesting about this, as time has gone on, I said at the beginning, I at first had a hard time with his work, but I've grown to very much enjoy it, especially the audios. I really, really enjoy listening to the audios. It's not written in telegraph style like his printed page, and it's just a little bit easier. And so I just want to make it very, very clear that anyone claiming that they have rights to Hoehn Research Library is not representing the truth. We've given you plenty of evidence today, beyond reasonable doubt, and we hope that not only with all this evidence of the materials that you will, because our main goal is we want people to read this material and to share it with others. That's why we're making it available.
Sister White tells us that at the end of time, many will have to learn in a very short time what it has taken others years to learn. And Hoehn put 65 years into the study of the original books. He knew what the events in their order were and how twisted it has been made in the church. And so we urge you to go on Hoehn
Research Library.org with a hyphen in between Hoehn hyphen research hyphen library.org
and study for yourselves so that you can understand the crisis that is just before us.
And we're Mark and Melanie Robansky of testimonypress.org and also Hoehn Research Library.org. God bless you.